In every family, there are mysteries we do not speak of. Moments when things shift but no one says why. Events that repeat themselves across generations without clear cause. Cycles that come and go. Poverty, sickness, delay, betrayal, sudden death, but are passed off as fate. And yet sometimes it's not fate, sometimes it's not bad luck. Sometimes it's witchcraft, and more painfully sometimes, the witch is someone inside the family, not a stranger, not a neighbor, but one who knows your name, one who knows your history, one who walks among you, laughs with you, eats with you, and perhaps even prays with you. A family witch is not always dressed in dark clothes. They don't always look mysterious. They don't always isolate themselves. In fact, the most dangerous ones are the most trusted ones. They blend in. They know the family's secrets. They know how to delay what is due to others while appearing helpful. They know how to project the image of loyalty while quietly operating in the dark. Identifying a family witch is not about suspicion. It is not about blaming every problem on one person. It is not about division or hatred. It is about discernment. Because witchcraft within a family structure is not random. It is strategic. It hides. It mimics love. And its agenda is to keep the family bound while the source remains hidden. That is why some families pray but never rise, fast but never break through, give but never receive. That is why some families appear united on the outside but are torn from within. Silent jealousies, sabotaged blessings, mysterious illnesses, unexplained losses. Sometimes the root is spiritual, and sometimes the hand behind it is familiar. This is a difficult truth. No one wants to think that someone they love could be the one tying their destiny. No one wants to imagine that a relative could be the reason their child is struggling. But throughout Scripture, we see that betrayal doesn't always come from outside. Cain and Abel, Joseph and his brothers, Absalom and David, Jezebel and her husband. Witchcraft operates best where trust is high and discernment is low. It thrives in the blind spots of relationships, and family is often the perfect cover. In this reflection, we will not accuse. We will not generalize. We will simply observe. We will walk slowly through the patterns, the signs, the behavior, and the silence. We will listen with the Spirit. We will not rush. We will not shout, because the truth does not need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be clear. If you have ever wondered why certain things never move in your family, if you've ever felt like something unseen is blocking your path, if you've ever noticed that the more you try to rise, the more pressure pulls you down, you may need to consider this truth. Not fearfully, but spiritually. Because the greatest deception of a family witch is not in their power. It is in their invisibility. They rarely speak of what they do. They do not boast. They do not openly confront. In fact, their silence is one of their strongest weapons. They observe more than they talk. They calculate. They listen carefully to every conversation at family gatherings. They pay attention to people's dreams and plans and respond with smiles. But behind those smiles are altars. Altars built in secret. Altars fed with jealousy. Altars that monitor and manipulate. The family witch thrives in information. They want to know who is doing well, who got a job, who is expecting a child, who is building, who is traveling. Because information fuels their assignments. They do not need to be told. Sometimes they only need to see. And once they see, they act, but not physically. They act spiritually. While others sleep, they are awake. While others relax, they engage the spirit realm, not for protection, but for control. Their silence is not peace. Their silence is strategy. And because they do not make noise, people do not suspect them. That is why silence, in the wrong hands, becomes a cloak for darkness. You'll notice that in some families, there are certain people who never speak ill of anyone. But nothing ever goes well when they are around. They may never raise their voice. They may never curse you openly. But your plans collapse after talking to them. Your joy disappears after visiting them. Your confidence shrinks after sharing with them. They say little, but their presence carries weight. Not the weight of wisdom, but the weight of spiritual interference, because the family witch knows that visibility is dangerous. So they remain unseen. They don't fight physically. They don't argue. They don't react. But they are always spiritually present, watching, listening, projecting. They'll offer to help you with a smile. But in the spirit, they are the reason the help you're waiting for keeps vanishing. They'll encourage you in front of others, but in the night, they lay hands on altars to slow your progress. The power of a family witch is rarely in confrontation. It is in quiet consistency, repeating patterns, unexplained tragedies, dreams that never come to pass, blessings that reach the door but never enter. They plant confusion but never get blamed. They steal joy but still get honored. They cause fights but look innocent. Because they do not move loudly, they are trusted, and that trust becomes their protection. But in the spirit, the silence speaks. Heaven sees what the family cannot. And when you begin to grow in discernment, when you stop listening with your ears and begin to perceive with your spirit, you start to notice the patterns. Not to hate, but to see. Because without revelation, oppression becomes normal. The family begins to live with delay, as if it is destiny. They start to accept cycles as personality. But what is spiritual must be discerned spiritually. And a family witch, no matter how silent, cannot remain hidden forever under the light of truth. In families where a witch is present, there is always something fragile about unity. Togetherness becomes short-lived. Peace never lasts. Conversations begin well but end in offense. Small misunderstandings escalate into years of silence. Love is expressed in words but withheld in action. Blessings rarely flow across the household at the same time. When one rises, the other falls. When one is celebrated, the other is attacked. And over time, a pattern sets in. A pattern of suspicion. A pattern of silent rivalry. A pattern of quiet resentment. And no one seems to know where it began. That's how a family witch works. Not by creating obvious war, but by planting silent division, invisible fences between people who should be helping each other. They weaken the bond. They confuse intentions. They magnify offense. They stir conflict in dreams, so that even rest becomes a battleground. They stir people's hearts against each other, while keeping their own hands clean. You'll notice blessings enter the family, but never stay. Opportunities come, but get lost in arguments. One gets a breakthrough, and suddenly others fall sick. Joy comes to one household and chaos visits the next. And slowly no one trusts anyone. But no one knows why. The witch in the family doesn't operate loudly. They target unity because where unity is broken, blessings are withheld. Psalm 133 tells us that where brethren dwell in unity, the Lord commands the blessing. So the strategy of the family witch is simple. Break the unity and stop the blessing. They do not need to touch the money. They only need to stir envy around it. They don't need to block the wedding. They only need to provoke confusion that causes delay. And in most families, these things happen without being traced. That's because the spiritual source is covered by relationship. It's hard to suspect the person who raised you. It's hard to imagine the one who feeds you is also feeding the altar. It's hard to question the one who always appears first when you're in trouble. But spiritual matters are not judged by appearances. They are judged by fruit. And when the fruit is bitterness, confusion, delay, and loss, something is wrong at the root. A family cannot move forward if it is secretly tied backward. And no matter how much they try to build, there will always be resistance if the foundation is spiritual manipulation. The family witch thrives in pretense. They celebrate people outwardly while casting lots against them inwardly. They attend Thanksgiving celebrations with their faces, but attend demonic councils with their spirits. And until someone discerns the patterns and begins to pray with understanding, the family lives under a ceiling. They prosper only to a point. They smile only to a point. They rise only to fall. The signs are subtle, but consistent. That's why this must be approached in the spirit, not with arguments, not with confrontation, but with revelation. Because until the spiritual root is exposed, the physical fruit will continue to rot. And a family held by witchcraft from within will always struggle to walk in wholeness. Sometimes the greatest danger is not in the fight, but in the gift. The family witch does not always come with curses. Sometimes they come with help. Sometimes they come with support. Sometimes they are the ones who offer food when no one else does. They buy clothes for the children. They contribute to school fees. They help during weddings and funerals. And slowly they become trusted. They become the ones who are always needed. And because their presence feels helpful, no one ever suspects that the help may be carrying a chain. But in the spirit, not all gifts are innocent. Not all food is neutral. Not all help is clean. Because witchcraft often travels through what looks kind. It hides in generosity. It hides in the things we welcome without prayer. That is why in some families, those who receive the most help from one particular person often struggle the most later on. They cannot explain why their finances dry up, why their relationships crumble, why their health shifts, why their mind becomes cloudy. But the gift was never just a gift. It was a point of contact, a way in, a seed that carried an unseen assignment. This is how the family witch operates. They understand spiritual laws. They know that the one who receives without discernment becomes vulnerable. So they keep giving, but their giving is not always for love. Sometimes it is to maintain spiritual access, to keep the soul open, to monitor, to delay, to confuse. And because they are family, the discernment is often low. No one expects spiritual bondage to be wrapped in kindness, but the Bible shows us that not all bread is holy, not all offerings are clean. Even in ancient times, sacrifices could be defiled, and many destinies were tied not through fights, but through feasts. Some family witches dedicate their giving. They speak over the gift before releasing it. They assign words in the spirit that follow the item wherever it goes. And once it is in your home, once it is on your child, once it touches your body, the effect begins. You don't see it immediately, but slowly things begin to shift. Dreams change, joy fades, doors close. And because the gift was given in love, you do not trace it back. That's why spiritual awareness is critical. Not to reject everyone, but to test every spirit, even within the family. Because not everyone who helps is clean, and not everyone who gives is led by God. Some gifts are simply coverings. They buy trust so that witchcraft can continue unnoticed. And once that trust is secured, the influence grows. They can speak into your life without question. They can suggest decisions. They can influence direction. They can advise your children. And with every word, the soul becomes more entangled. The more you receive, the more authority they gain, until you can no longer see where the bondage began. That is why it's important to pray over everything. to discern beyond kindness, because in the kingdom of darkness, the most effective curses are often wrapped in what appears good, and the family witch understands this deeply. The spirit world does not hide from those who are awake in the spirit, and one of the clearest ways God reveals hidden things is through dreams. Many times, the activities of a family witch will first appear in the dream realm, not as their physical form, but as symbols, as shadows, as strange encounters. You may not see their face, but you feel their presence. You may not recognize the figure, but the emotions in the dream mirror the real relationship. That's because the spirit realm often communicates in language beyond faces. It speaks in patterns, in signs, in repeated visits. You may find yourself dreaming of eating food served by someone familiar and then waking up tired or sick. You may see yourself receiving gifts in a dream from a relative, and afterwards things begin to break in your life. You may dream of going back to your childhood home, only to wake up confused and heavy. You may see a shadow sitting on your chest or watching you while you sleep. These are not ordinary dreams. They are glimpses of the spirit realm, trying to communicate what the physical eyes cannot see. Sometimes you may dream of an old relative calling your name repeatedly or dragging you somewhere. You may see them laughing as you cry or speaking in tongues that don't sound holy. You may wake up feeling like something was taken from you. These dreams are not random, they are windows. Because the witch in the family operates in secrecy, the spirit often uses dreams to warn, to show, to prepare. But the problem is many ignore them. They dismiss them as nightmares. They forget them by morning, or they are too afraid to think deeply about them. And yet, dreams are one of the most honest places where truth leaks through. You may dream that your documents are being burned by someone you know. You may see a wedding being interrupted by a familiar face. You may feel something pressing you at night, keeping you from calling the name of Jesus. These are signs of spiritual interference. And when they happen repeatedly, they are not to be ignored, especially if they are connected to someone in the family. It doesn't mean immediate accusation. It means attention. It means prayer. It means asking God to reveal with clarity what the enemy is trying to hide. Sometimes you may see animals in your dreams, snakes, cats, birds that seem to be watching or attacking. And when you wake up, you find that someone in the family has just called, visited, or asked questions about your progress. These are not coincidences. In the realm of witchcraft, dreams are doorways. They are access points, and the family witch knows how to use them. They project through dreams. They monitor through dreams. They block through dreams. And unless you become alert spiritually, you will keep experiencing the effect, but never identify the source. That is why it is important to record your dreams. Pray over them. Ask for interpretation. And take note of the patterns. Because while people can lie, dreams often don't. And God, in His mercy, uses them to guide, to reveal, and to protect. Delay is one of the most common weapons used by a family witch. It is subtle. It does not scream. It does not draw attention. It simply keeps you stuck in time, always almost arriving, always almost succeeding, always almost breaking through, but never quite stepping in. This delay often comes with no clear reason. Everything seems to be in place. The effort is there. The opportunities come close, but somehow they do not materialize. Things pause at the edge. Things collapse at the gate, and it becomes a pattern. When it happens once, it may be life, but when it happens again and again, across years, across siblings, across generations, it becomes spiritual. A family witch does not always destroy openly. Sometimes they just press pause. They suspend time around you. You feel like something is off, but you cannot explain it. You work hard, but the harvest is dry. You apply for jobs, but the answers vanish. You prepare for marriage, but something interferes. You save money, but it disappears through emergencies. And slowly you begin to internalize the delay. You begin to believe that maybe this is how life will always be. That's the goal of the family witch, not just to stop you, but to make you accept the stopping. Because once the mind is tied, the spirit follows. In many families, people live in cycles of rising and falling, cycles of relationships that never lead to marriage, cycles of pregnancies that end the same way, cycles of arguments that repeat with different faces, and these patterns are often unseen because the family is used to them. They call it tradition. They say this is how it has always been. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it is of God. Some families cannot move beyond a certain level. Education ends at a certain point. Marriage never works beyond a certain year. Businesses collapse after a certain size. And if you trace it, you find that the same thing happened to the parent and the grandparent, and now to the children. The family witch operates quietly behind these repetitions. They mark the lives of others in the spirit. They place spiritual embargoes that block progress after certain thresholds. And because the cause is not physical, people look for answers in the wrong places. They try harder. They move cities. They change jobs. They start over. But nothing changes. Because the problem is not the location. It is the spiritual agreement. Delay, in this context, is not just about time. It is about containment. The family witch contains people within limits. They create invisible ceilings. No matter how much one tries to rise, there is a point beyond which they cannot go. And if they try to break it, strange resistance follows. Dreams of being chased, confusion in decisions, sudden illnesses, financial dryness. These are not natural delays. They are controlled environments. And the one behind them is often unnoticed because they walk like everyone else. They speak like everyone else. But in the spirit, they have locked doors that others are praying to open. That is why prayer must go beyond surface requests. There must be deep inquiry. God, what is the root of this pattern? What altar is speaking against my rising? What covenant is working against my time? Because the moment truth is revealed, the delay begins to break, and once the hand behind the cycle is uncovered, the cycle begins to lose its power. One of the most effective hiding places for a family witch is religion, not true faith, but the form of godliness. They know the language, they attend the services, they speak the right words, they quote the right verses, and because of that, no one suspects them. Their prayers sound genuine, their presence in church is consistent. They are always present during spiritual functions. They are asked to pray for others. They are seen as the spiritual ones in the family. But beneath the surface, there is another altar. Not one built on the foundation of Christ, but one sustained by manipulation. Their spirituality becomes a covering. They speak of God, but they operate in darkness. They mention the name of Jesus, but their hands are in other realms. They fast, but it is not unto God. They pray, but their words carry assignments, and because they are religious, people trust them. People come to them for advice. People open their hearts to them. People reveal dreams to them. And through those open doors, they continue their work. This is not new. Even in the Bible, the enemy used spiritual language. When the serpent spoke to Eve, it did not come with violence. It came with a question, a religious-sounding question. Did God really say? When Jesus was tempted, the enemy used scripture, but he used it out of context. Not every religious voice is holy. Not every spiritual phrase is clean. The family witch understands how to dress witchcraft in spiritual garments. They use the name of God to disarm suspicion. They use holy speech to confuse discernment. And in many families, they are the ones who are most feared, not because of their character, but because of their religious image. No one wants to question the one who leads prayers. No one wants to doubt the one who lays hands. But spirituality without fruit is empty. Jesus said we will know them by their fruit, not by their words, not by their titles, not by their visibility, but by what follows them, by the patterns in their presence, by the spiritual outcomes connected to them. That's where the truth begins to speak. If every time they lead something, confusion follows. If every time they pray, people fall into delay, if their advice always leads to lost opportunity, if their involvement always results in strange loss, then there is a question to ask, not to accuse, but to observe. Because sometimes the religious covering is the strongest cloak for witchcraft. It keeps them untouched, it keeps them respected, and it keeps their altar protected from scrutiny. But God is not confused by appearances. He sees beyond language. He sees beyond rituals. He sees beyond the performance of holiness, and in time, He reveals what is hidden. That is why discernment is not based on how someone prays or how often they attend church. Discernment watches the spirit. It listens with stillness. It compares the words with the fruit. Because no matter how much someone pretends to be holy, if their spiritual environment is heavy, if their presence always drains, if their prayers never bring light, then something else may be operating. And when religion becomes a mask, witchcraft wears it to stay near. The family witch does not only focus on the present, they think in generations. Their goal is not just to block one person, but to ensure that the children and their children remain entangled. They study patterns. They observe tendencies. They look for who carries light, who carries promise, who carries calling. And once they identify it, they begin to plant early. They do not always wait for a child to grow. They begin while the child is still in the womb, sometimes even before. Through words spoken over pregnancies, through fear introduced in the mother, through spiritual transfers during naming, through gifts that seem innocent but are spiritually charged. The child begins life already marked, not visibly, but spiritually. And over time, things begin to manifest. Some children cry uncontrollably in specific homes. Some develop strange fears without cause. Some wake up from sleep screaming without reason. Some withdraw from progress. Some struggle in school. Some battle anxiety. And the family explains it away. They say it's phase, but it's not always a phase. Sometimes it is a spiritual rope, a silent chain tied by someone close. Because the family witch knows that if they cannot destroy the parents, they can delay the children. They can plant seeds that take root over time. They can initiate without ceremony. They can assign spirits through playthings. They can offer to babysit, and in that window, speak words that open spiritual doors. The child does not know. The parents are unaware. But in the spirit, something was signed. And unless someone rises in prayer, the tie remains. This is why some children grow up with unexplained burdens. They feel watched. They feel followed. They see shadows. They dream strange things. They begin to show behaviors that seem beyond their age. And the struggle continues into adulthood. A quiet resistance, a deep confusion, a recurring sadness, and behind it the source remains hidden. The family witch does not always come after money. Sometimes they come after joy. They aim to dull the soul of a child early, to dim the light before it fully shines, to build emotional walls before love takes root. And often the children targeted are the ones with spiritual gifts, the sensitive ones, the kind ones, the ones who ask questions others ignore, because they carry something pure, something unexplainable, something that threatens the darkness. And so the targeting begins, slowly, quietly, but intentionally. It may be through frequent illness. It may be through a strange attachment to the witch themselves. It may be through delayed speech or spiritual dreams. But always the sign is that something is pressing on their growth. And when the parents begin to see it, they must respond in the spirit, not with panic, but with wisdom. They must cover their children in prayer. Watch who speaks into their life. Be careful who lays hands. Be mindful of what enters the home, because the family witch is patient. They are willing to wait for years to see the seed mature. But when a parent walks in discernment, when a home is covered in the presence of God, the plans begin to fail. Because no matter how long witchcraft runs in a family, it cannot stand against spiritual light. And the moment someone sees the pattern and begins to speak life, the hold begins to weaken, the rope begins to loosen, and the next generation begins to rise free. The manipulation of destiny does not always begin with force. It often begins with influence. And the most dangerous influence is the one that feels close, the one that sounds right, the one that seems concerned. That is how the family witch operates. They do not always attack from the outside. They redirect from within, not by shouting, not by cursing, but by whispering. They offer advice. They plant doubts. They suggest delay. They mislead gently until the life that should be moving forward starts circling. The family witch studies a person's path from an early age. They watch how light forms. They sense how favor rests. They see what others overlook, and slowly they begin to press against it. Not with open war, but with quiet interference. They suggest changes that lead nowhere. They connect the person to the wrong people. They discourage important steps with spiritual language. They place confusion in the path of clarity, and all of it happens with the tone of care. That is how destinies are bent, not broken in one day, but reshaped slowly over time. A little delay here, a small compromise there, an unnecessary wait, a missed opportunity, a lost conviction, and by the time the person wakes up, years are gone and nothing has moved. The family witch rarely blocks the road entirely. They just reroute it. They turn destinies in circles. They introduce distractions that feel like direction, and because they do not seem aggressive, people trust them. That's what makes them hard to detect. They are not hostile, they are helpful. They do not insult. They intercede. They are always near, always involved, always asking questions, but in the spirit, their presence does not push you forward. It holds you still. They use their closeness as cover. Their history with the family becomes a shield. People say they've always been around, or they've helped so much, or they're part of everything. And because of that, no one checks their fruit. No one tests the spirit. No one pauses to ask, is this person tied to the stagnation we keep experiencing? Their invisibility is not because they're hidden well. It's because they're hidden in plain sight. That's how witchcraft survives in families. It lives in familiarity, in trust, in old stories. But God sees the roots, and He reveals patterns before He reveals people. In Scripture, Joseph's destiny was not attacked by strangers, it was his brothers. The ones who knew his dreams, the ones he trusted, the ones who shared his blood. Genesis 37 tells the story clearly. They saw his coat, they heard his vision, and they envied. They planned. They threw him into a pit, then lied to their father. That is how manipulation happens in families. Not always to kill, but to redirect, to delay, to silence the one with vision. And like Joseph, many carry a destiny that makes them targets, not from far, but from near. But the good news is no manipulation can cancel what God has established. It may take time. It may pass through pain. But destiny, once surrendered to God, cannot be stopped, only delayed. And once discernment comes and truth is allowed to speak, the manipulation begins to lose its voice. Because God always finishes what He starts. In every family, there may be hidden forces working quietly from within. Forces that look like love but carry delay, confusion, and brokenness. A family witch is often the silent presence who blends in, offering help while operating in the spirit realm to manipulate destinies and block blessings. Their weapon is silence and subtlety, using gifts, spiritual language, and emotional ties to stay trusted and hidden. They sow division where unity should grow. They work through delay and repeated cycles, stopping progress without drawing attention. They even target the next generation through unseen spiritual ties, affecting children before they fully grow. Their influence is hard to detect because it wears the mask of religion, family loyalty, and kindness. But God sees beyond appearances. He reveals the patterns that hold families captive. Just as Joseph's brothers tried to derail his destiny from within, so too can these hidden forces seek to redirect the lives of those they are close to. Yet no matter the delay or manipulation, God's purpose cannot be stopped. With spiritual discernment, prayer, and truth, the hold of such darkness begins to loosen. The chains start to break, and families can begin to walk again in light, freedom, and blessing. If this message has touched your heart or brought understanding, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Let us walk this journey of discernment and healing together. Thank you for listening. May your family be covered in peace and breakthrough.